Hey everybody, Chris Fafalius here. If you enjoy One Hit Thunder, which I'm assuming you do considering you're listening to it right now, I want to tell you about another great music podcast on the Evergreen Podcast Network. It's called Riffs on Riffs. On this season of Riffs on Riffs, hosts Toby Braswell and Joe Watson are breaking down one iconic pop song each week. Everything from Taylor Swift's Cruel Summer to Journey's Don't Stop Believin' to Naughty by Nature's OPP. Each week, they crack open the song, trace its history, decode those cryptic lyrics, and unearth the hidden gems in its musical DNA. Not only do they dive into the song's history, lyrics, and impact, they also go down some fun and oftentimes hilarious rabbit holes. So yeah, if you're a fan of One Hit Thunder, I think you'll also enjoy Riffs on Riffs. So go hit that subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods. This week, we're joined by Mark Popeney, one half of the new podcast, Nevermind the Music. With his background as a music professor, Mark takes us through the strange and often challenging journey of Squirrel Nut Zippers, who unexpectedly scored an alternative radio hit with their Cab Calloway-inspired song, Hell. Though lumped into the 90s swing revival, there was something that made them stand out, and this week, we try to pinpoint exactly what that was.
Listen attentively, I mean about future calamity. I used to think the idea was obsolete until I heard the old man stamping his feet.
One hit is all you need to make the money guaranteed, and you can live off royalties forever. And it makes me wonder, is it just a wonder, or is it one hit thunder?
So welcome to the show, Mark. I feel like I know you a little bit already because I listened to your episode of Weird Algorithm where you guys discussed Peter and the Wolf. So I know what I'm getting into. You know your stuff when it comes to music. And usually we talk about like what you got going on towards the end, but I want to talk about it up front today for a reason. You're a host of a new podcast called Nevermind the Music Podcast, where you and your co-host, you being the music professor of the two, and your co-host being the psychology professor, you dive into an iconic song to figure out why we love that song. So far, as of when we're recording this, you guys did Paramore's That's What You Get, Ace of Base, The Sign, and Bones, The Crossroads. And I bring this up because you're looking at it from an aspect of not only how the music hits you, but like what it is about the song from every aspect, psychologically, how the music's hitting you and affecting you. So my question to you is, why do I have such an aversion to the swing revival of the 90s? I really don't like. And I'll tell you this, Mark, because I know you're a fan of punk and ska. That's where I come from. That's the music I love.
Sure.
But the swing that was attached to it, like kind of peripherally, man, do I not like it. Why? Why don't I like it?
That's funny because I came in with all my theories about why I did like it.
Okay.
Because I think that's actually kind of hard to explain because it's so random. I can't think of anything more random than this band. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it, but this is sort of swing, but it's even kind of almost earlier sounding than that. Like this stuff sounds like the 20s, right?
Yeah.
And, I know that swing would have existed, but that's not the sort of classic era swing kids kind of World War II stuff.
That's kind of what I was going to mention right out the gate here, is as a person who grew up with a grandfather who loved big band music and loved that whole era of jazz music from like the late 1910s up until the 40s, I think even if I could understand not liking the swing revival, and I think part of it is because it felt inauthentic. I don't think that the Squirrel Nut Zippers are inauthentic. I think that the Squirrel Nut Zippers have a deep passion for that era of music and are desperately trying to create it where, like, let's be honest, like the Cherry Poppin' Daddies, the dirty secret that people don't talk about with the Cherry Poppin' Daddies was that they were a ska band for like 6 years that had like occasional swing songs on their albums and then saw this swing revival and quickly put out a greatest hits album of just the swing songs from their previous albums to cash in. Like, and I feel like that was so much of what was happening in that swing thing was like this Gap commercial blew up and all of these bands were like, if we just tweak our sound just a bit, our chance of getting back on the radio goes up. But the Squirrel Nut Zippers were not making, like, the Squirrel Nut Zippers and this song does not sound like Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, You, Me, and the Bottle Makes Three, or Zoot Suit Riot, or Jump, Jive, and Wail. Like, this feels like it could have come from that era genuinely. Like, when that swing revival was happening, my grandfather hated all of it except the Squirrel Nut Zippers. He bought every Squirrel Nut Zippers record because he was just like, this is great. Like, he thought it was so pitch perfect to what what he remembered listening to as a kid. Like,
I don't know. That's fascinating to me. I don't know. No grandsires of mine liked this band that I don't even think they ever heard it. But I do think there is something. This is, again, not answering Chris's question as to why he thinks it sucks. But I think there is something growing up. So I think I might be kind of in between the two of you in terms of age demographic. I was in high school when this happened.
Yeah, me too.
I was very Okay, so I was very thoroughly not into the sort of 80s Careless Whisper saxophone solo sound. It felt so dated to me. And I feel like when ska, and granted, now I love that stuff and I grew to love it a few years only later, but in my high school, everything from 8 years ago sucks sort of phase, this sort of ska offered an alternative, like, oh, that's a trombone solo that doesn't sound like anything, not that you would hear a lot of trombone in the 80s anyways, but it sounded like, oh, that's a different kind of raucous, noisy sort of horn sound. And then that maybe opened up the floodgates to other things like Cake. Like the trumpet in Cake did not sound like what my brain thought trumpet songs would be. And here's this alternative rock thing coming from Sacramento, which felt sort of close to me. And I like that. And then I think I kind of also liked this because it was this alternative to what I grew up thinking. And also, my parents are boomers, right? And in the 90s, all this retro 60s stuff was coming. The Beatles anthology. And now, granted, now the Beatles are like my top 5 band, right? But in high school, I was like, oh my God, the Beatles. They just, I'm so sick of hearing that. Or like, I could hear the influence when I heard like a Pearl Jam song and the guitar part sounded like Jimi Hendrix. I knew the 60s, whereas this felt like this foreign world that nobody had ever done before. Like, it was almost cooler to listen to what my grandma would listen to than it was to listen to what my parents would listen to. So I feel like that's my answer as to why this felt safe. But I do think there is something inauthentic seeming. But the weird thing about it is, like, I play in a ska-ish band now, and it's just all the guys that I play with actually are jazz guys. We just sort of play ska because that's what we thought would be fun. So I wonder, it sounds like the Cherry Poppin' Daddies, it would be inauthentic for them to be a ska band, but maybe they secretly actually just wanted to play jazz and swing the whole time.
And they were like, oh, finally, our time has come. Yeah. Yeah,
when you're a sax player in whatever the late 80s or 90s when they were born, like, well, that's what you probably played when you were in high school or college or whatever, right? It's not like they wanted to be in a marching band, right? Yeah. Probably so. I don't know. Chris, I think, is it the inauthenticity?
You know, I will say, despite my aversion to the swing revival, when I was listening to this song today, this is probably the best song of that. Not saying that I love it, but the couple things about this that I thought were especially cool. One, they do, and when I watch live performances, they do seem pretty authentic. Like, these are amazing players and performers, singers. This band is really good, and I'm a sucker for the sort of themes of this song. Like, it's like a song that could have been very G-rated, which it still kind of is, but it's about something dark. And when you watch the music video and things start getting darker throughout the music, I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. You're taking something that could have easily been I don't know, industrial music or new metal or something like the themes you might hear in those styles of music, but you're putting it in something that sounds like it's from like the 1920s or 30s.
Yeah, it's a
and that's
calypso song, basically.
Yeah, it's actually cooler. I respect that. It still doesn't make me want to listen to it. I think the main thing with swing for me is it sounds like I'm at like an arts fest and I'm walking past a band and I'm like, oh, they're good at their instruments. I'm going to go get a funnel cake now.
That's what I was going to say. I think one of the I didn't know this prior to doing this episode, but it was one of the least shocking things that I learned was this is off their second album, Hot, but their first album, Inevitable, was getting a ton of airplay exclusively on NPR. And I'm like, that doesn't shock me at all that this like random 1920s, very like Cab Calloway influenced version of swing music comes out of nowhere before the swing revival, and like NPR just like latches onto it and is like, this is the sound of NPR. Like, this is what we want to be playing in 1994 right now, as grunge is like still kind of happening everywhere else. Their list of influences does include like Cab Calloway, Johnny Ace, Fats Weller, and those are guys who did sing like if you read the lyrics to Minnie the Moocher, it is like a dark song about basically a black widow that's just killing rich men after rich man to take their money. But you know, the way Cab Calloway does it, it seems so theatric and
fun. Yeah,
it's they're definitely pulling from that style more than anything.
I also think like, and I'm not a jazz guy. I don't know how to play jazz or write jazz or whatever, but this has nothing to do with jazz that has been made in the last like 70 years at this point. That's what's so weird. It's like, if you think of jazz influenced people in this sort of rock space, I know this isn't rock, but it was on alternative radio and stuff like that. But like, you think of like jazz rock or prog rock and it's all complicated and fancy. This is two chords, and this like people that like jazz, this is barely jazz, right? That's the weird thing. It feels so old, almost like was recorded 75 years ago or whatever at this point, 100 years ago, and we just discovered it. But I think that's part of what makes this band cool, whereas maybe some of the other bands you would hate, Chris, is they are really good at their instruments, but it's really rough. Like, this is a band. Think of all the bands that you can think of with 3 lead singers, and think of like the awesome vocal harmonies, right? If it's Fleetwood Mac or the Beatles or this band, it sounds like they're just shouting like it's the first take. Oh, did you learn your part? Nah, just sing it. They're just like, in the afterlife, right? And that's pretty cool because it's really hard to, if you are highly trained musicians, which if you look at the personnel list for this album, it's like they all play 5 different instruments. It's like the guitar player also plays baritone, saxophone, sings lead, stuff like that. They're obviously really trained, but to make it sound sort of irreverent and rough and lazy is very different, because I do think some of that other swing revival maybe really was hitting the let's make a polished modern recording technology version of this style of music that maybe you've heard on an old record at grandma's house.
Yeah, this
so it was
you
too perfect.
listen to it and you can almost imagine they're recording it in like the studio where, you know, Man of Constant Sorrow was recorded in No Brother Where Art Thou, right? Like
on one microphone.
Yeah, like just one microphone in the middle of the room and just them like having fun doing it. I got to give a shout out to both the name Squirrel Nut Zippers, which is just a crazy name, and the origins of that name are insane. A nut zipper was a Southern term for old bootlegged moonshine, and the name came from a newspaper article that they found from that time period where a drunk guy climbed up a tree and refused to come down, and the headline was Squirrel Nut Zipper, referring to a caramel peanut candy that was available in 1890. So even the name is like this very vintage thing. But this came from the brainchild of Jumbo Mathis and his wife at the time, Catherine Whalen. And I got to give a shout out to Jumbo Mathis for his former band's name, Johnny Vomit and the Dry Heaves.
Pretty good one.
Is both the best and worst band name I've ever heard in my entire life.
This is one of those bands when you go to their Wikipedia and you look at past members.
Oh,
it's like 50 people. One of
50
those
people, yeah.
though, I don't know. Are either of you guys familiar with Andrew Bird?
Andrew Bird. Yeah.
Yeah.
He plays fiddle on this, doesn't he?
Yep. On this particular album, he was in the band.
That's wild. I mean, yeah, I guess if you have 50 people in your band playing your band, someone's eventually going to have some other
Roll
sort
the
of
dice,
noteworthy
yeah.
career. I think Andrew Bird, I went to South by Southwest one year. I think Andrew Bird played that year.
Oh, wow.
Another thing about this, as far as, back to what I originally asked, like, what is it about swing? I think, Mark, you hit a good point, is like, first of all, can we never say the name Cherry Poppin' Daddies again? That is the worst, most disgusting band name. And look, Cherry Poppin', I don't even want to say it, the Daddies, which is, by the way, Chris DeBakes told me this, that he hates that band name too. And he said that on flyers at certain places, because they would have like shows with them sometimes, they would just call them the Daddies. Like they didn't want to put that on flyers for certain things, so they were just called the Daddies. But that band was associated with like Goldfinger and Real Big Fish. They were on the same like imprint record label.
Yeah, they were on Mojo.
Yeah. And so when that came out, I was like, why don't I like this? I like all these other bands. I didn't like it. And what I want to say about it, this all relates back to like the theme of your podcast, Mark, is like, that was back in a time before I knew anything about, when I could still consume music in a way where I wasn't in my mind dividing, like hearing all the things individually. I was just hearing it as one sound and not thinking about what it took to make it, what each thing is individually doing. I was hearing it as one thing, which I kind of wish I could hear music like the way I heard it when I was a teenager again. But there was something about that sound of swing music where I was like, no, thank you. No,
Chris,
this did not work.
Chris, did I ever tell you that in high school, and this was a mistake, because anybody who knows me knows that I have a passion for music, but I don't have a skill set for music. I can strum like 4 chords on a guitar, and that's about it. But when I was in high school, I took what ended up being an advanced music theory course that only took in 5 to 6 students for the class. Again, in high school, which is like the way you would treat a college course. And my final was that I had to take a piece of music, and I genuinely can't remember what piece of music it was, but take a piece of music and transcribe it so that a quartet could play it. So I had to learn what the scales were for each individual instrument and literally transcribe a full like 4-minute song into something that a quartet could play with proper harmonies and stuff. And I think ever since doing that class, what you were talking about is like, that's all I think about now. Like when I see any ska band or any swing band, I'm just like, someone's job in that band is to know how to transcribe what the different instrumentation is going to be for every instrument in this band. And it like breaks my brain a little bit.
I think it's interesting. Like, I mean, we're getting way off topic, but like, who is the arranger, right? That person's job is the arranger. Like, if you were doing big band jazz or film music, you would actually hire a person to do that.
Yeah, because you can't just have like 7 dudes just show up and just riff what they feel like.
You usually can't wing it, right? But it's like, who is that guy, right? Is it one of the horn players? Is it the songwriter? Is it the producer doing it? Guy, I say guy, the general, the human being sense of the word. But like, this band feels a little bit like it might be barely controlled chaos. And I think part of that is they have that, I guess the modern term would be trad jazz. The old school term would be Dixieland. It's like not cool to say Dixieland anymore, but where the instruments are kind of all playing at the same time, kind of like counterpoint would be the term. They're not playing like a ba-da chord together. They're all playing melodies that kind of work against each other, and you kind of can just wing that, right?
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need an arranger to write out, like my band we have 3 horn players, and I kind of write out like, okay, trumpet 2 will play this, trumpet 1 plays that, or tenor sax or whatever plays this. And that's not at all what some of these songs sound like. And this one even has a clarinet, which is super trad jazz, New Orleans style jazz. You don't hear clarinets much in pop songs after like, Benny Goodman or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, I think that just kind of connects to that authenticity thing on some level.
They capture this era of New Orleans sounding jazz specifically, where like one of the songs, it's one of my favorite songs of that time period, but this song doesn't sound like this, but it gives the same vibe of this. Is I'm gonna blank on its name. It's a Duke Ellington song, East Side Toodaloo or something like the
East
one
St. Louis Toodaloo.
Yeah, the da da bow wow.
It's super minor key.
Yeah,
something.
It's
they're
just
sounding
creepy.
like that. Yeah,
it's a creepy sound that you could only get from like muted trumpets and clarinets and playing at this weird slowed down tempo. And I feel like what they did was took that creepiness and just like sped it up just enough that you don't notice how creepy it is until you dig like one layer deeper into like, what are they singing about exactly? Like, I've sung my heart out to this song in the car for years, and today was the first time I learned a couple of the lyrics. Because I was like, oh, that's what they're like. Specifically, the teeth are extruded and the bones are ground and baked into cakes that they pass around. Like, I did not know that that's what he was saying in that part of the song at all. And it's just describing torture. It's describing what they think hell would be like to somebody.
Hell, yeah. I mean, I've actually been in not one but two groups over the decades that have covered this song in performances and stuff. And so I figured out that this song is weirdly like an evangelical fire and brimstone sermon. Like the reason I played it is I played it Halloween. If I ever have a Halloween gig, like, let's dust off hell, but there's nothing Halloween about it. It's religious on some weird level. I don't know that it comes from a place of belief, but it's certainly capitalizing on that as an angle.
I think it still goes back to that, what they're pulling from though. Like, it makes sense because again, when you look at those 30s songs, they do have that weirdly like to bring up Minnie the Moocher again, like that song's not celebrating Minnie the Moocher. It's like a warning of like, stay away from promiscuous women, because they're like, all of those songs have that like almost evangelical way that they're presented, and I think it's almost the way the vocals are done. Tom Maxwell, who sings this particular song on the album, does such a like Cab Calloway type singing style with the like, in the afterlife, like it's that very all over the place with his voice. It's so fun though. All
the singers are kind of super idiosyncratic. Did you all listen to any of the other songs on this record or any of the other tunes?
I have all of their albums. I am a huge Squirrel Nut Zippers fan. I actually think their best song was the single off the follow-up album, The Suits Are Picking Up the Bill. Like that song is so fun. Like
so I think, but part of it is it's like he's got that kind of showy voice.
And then she's got like a Betty Boop type voice, Catherine, when she sings. Yeah,
Billie Holiday, right?
Yeah.
She's like, that you say, like, you can't do that, except is she born just able to do it? I don't understand. And then the Jimbo Mathis has the more rough kind of, but he's the only one still standing. I don't know, we can talk about that later, but
the band's all kind of scattered everywhere. I want to give a very quick update to Tom Maxwell because I got curious. I was trying to figure out who was the arranger in the band, and I stumbled onto this. So Tom Maxwell, sad part of Tom Maxwell's story is that he went through a divorce, and literally the same day that he went through the divorce, he found out that his 3-year-old had leukemia, and that's when he stepped away from music and quit the band to focus all of his energy on taking care of his son. But that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about this last sentence in his personal page that says, in 2014, Maxwell and his family moved in to a historic Greek revival mansion in North Carolina, but they broke their lease due to what they reported were various haunting experiences. So the guy who wrote and sang Hell in 2014 had to leave a mansion because it was haunted, which I just think is kind of beautifully poetic in a weird way.
Well, do you guys know that tune? They have a tune, Ghost of Stephen Foster.
Great song.
Yeah.
The video of that, have you seen that? Like,
dude.
So this is like, I had never heard that album until like a couple days ago, but I knew that because it was Spike and Mike's Sick and Twisted Festival and Animation, a thing on your coast back then. Yeah. I showed up at one, and a Squirrel Nut Zippers video was one of the short films they were showing. And that, like, is the term like rotoscope or whatever? It's like, it looks like an old Steamboat Willie like 30s cartoon.
It looks like
song.
that video game Cuphead.
Yes.
Exactly. Black and white. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like it's another, like that's the haunted ghost story sort of Halloween-y song for some reason. I don't know why they're talking about Stephen Foster, the songwriter, but I don't know if that's a Tom Maxwell song or a Jimbo Mathis song though.
I can never tell. The other song that I love by them that wasn't a single was the song right before this on the album, Prince Nez, which has like, I think when I think of, this is going to go back to something I've said on Weird Algorithm before, but we're talking about all these other jazz musicians that they pull from, like the Cab Callaways and the Fats Wellers. But Prince Nez does almost a Spike Jones type move at the midway point, because it's this like kind of just like laid back loungy song where it's like, everywhere old Prince Nez goes, that's where I go to. And it's this kind of boppy song. And then out of nowhere, you just get this snare drum hit and the song just kicks into high gear. And it's this super fast jazz song where they're just repeating the lyrics at like double the speed that they were originally singing it, which, you know, makes me think of the way Spike Jones would do his music, where it would start off as the original composition of a song, and then all of a sudden there's a gunshot or a crazy snare intro, and then you've got this sped up, wacky version with sound effects. Like, I just think that the reference point for Squirrel Nut Zippers runs so much deeper than a lot of the other bands, where I feel like Big Bad Voodoo Daddy and the Crown, Royal Crown Review, and like those bands, I'm sure love swing music, but I feel like it was that they just really liked, you know, like you said, Benny Goodman and you know, Glenn Miller, and kind of like the big names of 40s big band music. And these guys are pulling from like, these feel like record store nerds who formed a swing band. Like they found the obscure records that no one was listening to in the 90s and started pulling inspiration out of it.
Ready for a head-bangingly good time? Dive into the world of heavy metal with the Brutally Delicious podcast. Here, we don't just talk music. We welcome you into our heavy metal family. Join us for candid chats with legends and rising stars. We go beyond the typical interviews, exploring raw emotions and the life-altering impact of heavy metal. So whether you're a diehard metalhead or just curious, join our family and let the headbanging begin with the Brutally Delicious podcast.
Bowie, Dylan, Marley. You've heard the names and maybe you've heard their songs, but what about the stories behind the records that made titans of music like these so universally loved and important? Join me, Josh Adam Myers, host of The 500, as each week I go through a different album from Rolling Stone magazine's 500 Greatest Albums list from 2012 with an incredible lineup of comedians, actors, and musicians talking about how the music has impacted their lives. New episodes of The 500 come out every Wednesday. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you troubled by trying to find a great movie podcast to listen to?
Do you experience a love for monster movies, from the classic Universal era to the modern creature features?
Have you or your family ever watched episodes of Elvira, Monster Vision, or Svengoolie?
If the answer is yes, then don't wait another minute. Open up your podcatcher and search for the professionals. The Monster Rally Podcast.
Our hilarious and asinine hosts have an ever-growing library of episodes for you to listen to 24 hours a day to serve all your monster movie needs.
We'll talk about it.
These guys were part of a scene, I guess. I only pick up on this from the YouTube comments on the music videos. But the Chapel Hill, North Carolina scene, I believe that they were part of like a group of other bands that were, I doubt they sounded exactly like Squirrel Nut Zippers, but maybe pulled from some of the same influences and were able to play shows together. Because I saw people commenting on that, like, oh, the 90s Chapel Hill scene. Like, I guess that was a thing. And
You had to be there.
yeah, right. And you guys brought it up when I was saying this at the beginning, and I guess you're right that I guess this song isn't necessarily swing music. I saw, it's so funny when you look at what they're described as by other people. They said they're a fusion of Delta blues. I don't know exactly what Delta blues is. gypsy jazz, which I don't necessarily know what gypsy jazz is, 1930s era swing, okay, I know what that is, and klezmer, which
Sure. Yeah, I believe that.
Oh, I hear klezmer for sure.
Should I like be all music professor?
Please,
yeah.
please.
So Delta Blues, I don't really hear that. So Delta Blues is like Robert Johnson,
okay,
Blind Lemon Jefferson, like it was recorded in the 20s and 30s, but probably existed in like the 90s, 1890s and stuff. This is the really early solo guitarist singing, I got the man woman, kind of that's so soulful what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned, oh brother, where art thou?
That's Delta
the guy
Blues,
that they meet on the road that's like what you think of as the traveling blues man. I don't really hear that in this. Maybe the vocalist a little bit, but
not in this particular song. But they definitely have, I think,
sure,
a couple songs that have that, like, maybe not for the whole song, but the beginning of the song has that like bluesy guitar and almost like staticky in the distance vocal before it kicks in. So I'm sure there's a little bit of influence, but the klezmer I hear way more.
Yeah, klezmer is the Eastern European Jewish traditional, but sort of party music, I think. I don't know much about it, but the wobbly, vibrato-y clarinet and fiddle lines, that's very klezmer-y, I think.
Yeah, think of like literally like Hava, na 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 ba ba, like the band that would play that.
Let me ask you guys if this would, this is what came to my mind when you said that. Do you guys know the Ben Folds 5 song, Stephen's Last Night in Town?
Yes.
Chris,
I wanted to mention this. Yeah. Ben Folds is from North Chapel. So
from Chapel Hill, you mean?
Yeah, Chapel Hill, yeah. So that's what they're talking about, I think, when they say Chapel Hill. I'm almost curious if the clarinet player on Stephen's Last Night is someone who was in Squirrel Nut Zippers.
Wow. Well, that's a Google
But it has
search away.
that, it's like clarinet, but it's not the way that you're supposed to play clarinet if you take like middle school band. They do it like woo, like vibrato-y and like it's very jazzy. That's the klezmer sound. And gypsy jazz, which also probably just like we're not supposed to say Dixieland anymore. There's probably a better name for gypsy. Romani jazz, right? Is a kind of jazz that's like guitar jazz. There's a guy named Django Reinhardt who, take a listen, he's this guitarist. And I think it's probably one of those things where there's no electric guitars, so you have to play as loud as you can. And so it's like your solos are chords. So gypsy jazz solos, it's like you go like, they're like jamming on these weird, not bar chords necessarily, but these jazz chords that are moving around crazy fast. That's that sound. And if you listen to like, not this song, but like, I think it's the first song on this record, which is called like Got My Own Thing Now or something like that. The guitar solo sounds exactly like Django Reinhardt would be that. And I don't know that a style really beyond that, but it's this sort of weird, again, this is early. This is probably 30s, 20s, 30s, maybe later than that, but something around that. And it all kind of is in this mix, but going back to the like fact that this felt like music out of, like, I don't know, to the extent that me as a 15-year-old even understood nostalgia. But this was beyond my cultural touchstones. Like if you played me a song that was a disco song in 1994 or whatever, I would have been able to say that sounds like disco. But if you played me a swing song, I'd be like, oh, that sounds like swing music. But if you played me gypsy jazz or trad jazz or klezmer, it was just this blur of like old that didn't mean anything to me.
Right.
And so it all fits somehow.
I want to throw this out there real quick. I did just Google it to find out. So the clarinet player on Stephen's Last Night is not from the Squirrel Nut Zippers, but him and the violin player and the trumpet player on that song are all from a group called the Klezmatics. That was a klezmer, like a klezmer punk band, basically, that was coming out from that time. Actually, their debut album was called Jews with Horns. So that was the Klezmatics. Check them out, I guess. But tied to Ben Folds. So we got that going.
Chris,
for us.
simple question. We're bearing the lead here. You don't like swing revival. Do you dance? Do you like to dance?
I love to dance. Just not to swing
Not
music.
swing.
Swing music does not make me want to dance. It makes me want to change the song. That's it. And I don't know why I'm so like, it is like, it really is. Squirrel Nut Zippers are a little bit different. I will say that today when I watched, I hadn't listened to the song in forever, And I watched it. I'm like, okay, I like the video. I don't think I would listen to this, but I don't hate it. And I do like, I wanted to mention this. What is creepier and weirder than the fire and brimstone religious stuff? That is like, it's so funny because it's supposed to be like, what gets you to heaven if you believe in this stuff, but it's actually the darkest stuff imaginable. And it's scary not only to, the descriptions of what happens in hell. That stuff's scary. But also what's even scarier than that to me is the people that believe that. Believe that like, oh, you're going to get your bones ground up if you don't, if you don't do these certain things.
If you
that
touch
kind of stuff,
yourself at night, you're going to have your teeth ripped out.
Yeah, like that is actually pretty, and I like that kind of stuff. It's like why I like the Halloween time of year. It's like why I like horror movies. It's interesting. It's fun, and I like that about it. And I do think that this is, there's something that I could kind of like. I watched live performances. I watched him play on Conan. Dude, guys, I watched him play on Sesame Street. Yep. Did you know they played on Sesame Street?
I think they did put a lid on it though, right?
Really? Oh, they did put a lid on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it was because it was Grover, and then there was some like bald puppet, and they kept putting different things on his head that rhymed with wig. I think they eventually wanted to put a wig on his head, right? And they did that song. But they're obviously really good. Once again, I think that these are obviously all classically trained, amazing musicians. I do like what you said, Mark, about the fact, and I wanted to say this when you guys were talking about someone has to be the arranger, someone has to be, let everyone know what to play. I kind of feel like when I listen to them that like everybody, someone brings the song, the bones of the song, but to me when I listen to this, it feels like everyone's putting their own touch on it, right?
There's something that bums me out about what happens with this band, because I don't know the details of their breakup, but I know, like, I saw them they came back in the late 2000s. I saw them, and then they're out again now, but I think it's basically just Jimbo Mathis plus new people. But what bummed me out, I read a post or like I guess it was on Medium, an interview maybe with Tom Maxwell, who wrote this song and used to be in the band and is the lead vocalist. He's one of the guys who played like 10 instruments or whatever. But they came back to do a, what do they call it? Like not a reunion, but the 20th anniversary thing where they were going to tour around this album specifically, do the Hot tour, right? And he got the band together, Jimbo did, and it's like not necessarily the old people, including not Tom Maxwell, who wrote the song and was the lead vocalist of the song. And so it sounds so collaborative, but then it's like, what are they covering? It almost is like they're covering a different band on some level. If it's like one of the, like when something feels so collaborative, what happens when you lose those pieces? Like he says, I didn't quote anything, but he says basically like Jimbo has no business singing this song. Like it's not his to sing, but it's like they are the Squirrel Nut Zippers. Tom Maxwell is not the Squirrel Nut Zippers. So it's weird to go from like this kind of what has to be such a collaborative energy to maybe like this one guy show with his hired guns, which is what it is in 2024 maybe. And that's a bummer to me if that's actually the trajectory.
The big thing that happened was basically that Jimbo and Catherine divorced. When they got divorced, that kind of just split the whole band apart. And I'm almost wondering if I feel like it probably had to have was considered an asset in that divorce that had to like have a percentage given to one or the other because it was probably both of their income.
She played the reunions with them though.
Yeah, but she's not in the new version of it. When they toured for this album, she was not a part of it.
Oh, okay.
So
I mean, it was probably a combination. I'm just speculating here. A combination of it's always a bad idea to be married to someone you're in a band with. That's not a good idea. Just look at history. That doesn't really work.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. And then imagine the second part of it is, hey, we can argue here whether or not they're swing, but they were definitely lumped into that. And then if you have the labels snatching up the swing thing and then it's out as quickly as it came in. I mean, ska was the same thing in the 90s.
Yeah.
That was a wave. In 97 was probably the peak of that wave. And then there were just a couple bands that were able to maintain long careers after that. Less Than Jake and Real Big Fish, maybe a few more Bosstones for a while. But there was this wave. So, once that part was over, if you have this, some people can't recover from that high tide. We talk about it a lot on here, Mark, that if we had a hit, I think that, I haven't had a hit, and yet I've still had a band for 27 years. And I think some people just can't handle that if they have that, to see that kind of diminishing returns, I guess you would call it, and not want to weather that storm. So I don't know. It seems to make sense to me that they wouldn't have lasted after 2000.
I want to mention this as you're talking about things that were here one day and gone the next. The album Hot, which the song Hell is found on, was also one of the first enhanced CDs.
Yeah.
If you remember the era of enhanced CDs, it had a whole short film directed by a North Carolina filmmaker named Clay Walker. So when you pop the CD in, you got like a 20-minute documentary about the history of the Squirrel Nut Zippers inside the album.
I think Clay Walker did their music video for Hell.
Probably did that too, yeah.
I'm pretty sure he did. And hey, let's not downplay the fact they sold 1 million copies of this.
They sold 1 million copies. They went on tour as the opening act for Neil Young, which is a very weird person for the Squirrel Nut Zippers to be opening for. They played the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta and Bill Clinton's second inauguration party. So you could. Wow. And then they were on Sesame Street. They were on top of the world.
They had their moment. They definitely had their moment.
But was this even a hit? Song?
No, to me, it didn't even cross over to Hot 100. It peaked at 13 on the mainstream alternative airplay charts.
Yeah, usually we pull up the charts what was this above? What was it below? Yeah. This song was never on the Hot 100. It was, I guess it was one of those MTV songs, right? I mean, the music video was visually interesting to look at, and just another on a long list of bands and artists that have a lot MTV to thank for a lot of their success, I think.
Yeah. I do need to also just shout out lyrically, this was a classic Matt Kelly not knowing what the actual words are. Until today, I did not know that the last line of this song was lose your face, lose your name, and then get fitted for a suit of flame.
It's a mouthful, that's why.
Well, I used to, the way I sang it for most of my life, because how back in that day with the ska bands, they would always throw in some I used to think it was then get ready for a two-tone flame. And then the whole horn section came up. At the end of the day, this was just about ska and swing music.
Hey, I usually have a little game to play in these episodes, and I don't really have a game today, but at the beginning of this episode, I kind of started it out by really generalizing by saying I don't like swing music or swing revival. Really, it's kind of hard for me to say I really dislike this swing band from the 30s or whatever. No, I'm not saying that. It was probably the coolest thing out at the time, but I have a list here of styles of music, and we will include swing revival here. And of course, there's always going to be a few, maybe a band or an artist. You're okay, that's an exception to the rule. But from this list, what is the worst style of music? And these are all ones that are, this isn't my list. I don't hate all these types of music. I try not to hate anything. I would just say, let's say strongly dislike. What is the worst of these styles? Here, let's put it this way. Let's make it episode centric. Your idea of hell, if you were in hell, this would be the kind of music that would be on a loop while your bones are being grinded and whatever other fire and brimstone type of things are going on in hell. Of this list, what type of music, what type of playlist would be playing? Here are your choices. We're going to put swing revival in there. Butt rock, what is commonly called butt rock. So sort of post-grunge. We all know what butt rock is.
That's butt rock. So for me, butt rock, I feel also is a term I would hear about 80s hair metal too.
Yeah, see, it's funny. You say that. I thought that too. I used to think because because they're wearing spandex and you see their butts and they're shaking their butts. No, butt rock is Nickelback, Creed. Hinder, bands like this where they got the term, I don't know if you know this, we've talked about it a couple times, but the term came from there are radio stations that play nothing but rock. So people started calling it butt rock. So it's basically like the type bands, you know?
I got to change my class syllabus, I guess, for my rock and roll class. Okay, all right.
You have butt rock in your syllabus?
We have a whole unit, a whole chapter.
Okay,
No,
nice.
obviously
yeah,
no.
These should each be
gotcha.
a unit. These should each be a unit for you, Mark. Okay, so
Stained, Stained and stuff like that. Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Yes.
Got it.
Pop country, which also includes bro country. Those are one and the same to me. That's a rough one. Pop
Not like T Swift. You don't mean like early Taylor. You mean
no.
No, like Florida Georgia line.
Yeah.
Like the mixing of country and hip hop and all
Got
the
it.
songs are just about like getting fucked up.
Yeah.
Got it.
We're gonna throw new metal as a choice. Pop punk. Now I know that's rich coming from me, but there's this certain style. My band gets called pop punk. I get that. And so does, a lot of great bands get called that. But I'm talking about the nasally guys in their 40s singing about being in high school. Like that type of like really, I don't know. That's rough for me. Like,
well, and if this is hell, it's not like you're choosing the best pop punk album. It's
Right.
It's either replacement level, just random kind of it's got to be some kind of random distribution of the characteristic negative aspects probably
so
too.
you might get a few good ones in there. Like spoiler alert, pop punk is not going to be my answer because there are plenty of good pop punks. But there's some of the worst music ever written is pop punk too.
Yeah.
So I'll say that. Few more choices for you guys. Christian rock.
I'm not taking that one down.
Christian rock is rough.
That's pretty broad, but yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Mumble rap. A lot of people have issue with mumble rap. Matt's not going to like this one. Christmas music. That's a rough one for a lot of people.
I've got my pick already locked in, but I'm waiting to see the other options.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. 4 more. Reggae.
Oh man.
Reggae.
Okay.
Jam band music.
It would break up my podcast if I chose that. My co-host would be so mad at me.
Yeah.
Anyways, go ahead. Spoiler, I'm not going to say jam band regardless of what I think of jam band music.
Big Fish Head. You got a Big Fish Head co-host?
Well, guys in my band are that, but
in your
something
band,
like that.
in your band.
Yeah. Well, no,
I thought-
both. I'm surrounded by them. It's my band and my podcast co-host.
Gotcha.
But that kind of thing, yeah.
The 2 more I'll add on here are hair metal and jazz.
All right. I'm going to jump in.
You starting us off.
Bro country. I have yet to find a single, like any of the other things that you've named, there has been like a one-off outlier, be it a song or a band where I'm like, all right, that was okay. I have not found a single bro country song that I've actually loved.
Matt, have you heard the Shabuzi song?
I think I've heard
Everybody
the Shabuzi
in
song.
the club getting tipsy. You don't know that one?
No, I'm not. Yeah, not for me.
Okay.
Never has been for me. So bro country is what I'm
Okay.
definitely voting for.
Mark, do you have a clear cut answer to your hell playlist?
I have to answer the question with a question just to clarify because I think I know my answer, but how generous a definition of new metal are we using? Because there are bands that I love that sometimes get called new metal.
Right.
That I reject that.
I would
but
say
maybe it's
not
just 'cause I
Rage
like
Against the
them.
Machines, but anything that bounces
Well,
off of like Korn and Limp Bizkit.
What
and
about
beyond.
System of a Down or Tool? Like I've heard people say, or Incubus, people say they're new metal, and I'm like, no way.
I would say System of a Down, yes, would get lumped in there, even though they shouldn't be. I'm going off what people would. I'm saying some random ass person makes this playlist. System of a Down, I would say yes. Rage Against the Machine, I don't think they're new metal at all, but I think an idiot would put them on a playlist of it. Deftones, amazing band. They would get lumped into this.
Okay, that's tough. But I'm going to choose new metal.
Okay.
And on the bright side, even though it makes it sort of not the worst, I will get to every now and then hear a System of a Down or a Deftones song in hell. So that's a good thing. But the reason I feel like there's something about new metal that bugs me the most because I love fusion styles. I love ska punk. I love when you mix it. I like reggae rock, like Sublime kind of stuff. I love this band, Squirrel Nut Zippers, because they're mixing styles. I love country rock from the 70s. I like it when people are mixing. And new metal is like, it's like when you add a combination of spices in the recipe and it just doesn't work. Like there's something about the rapping with the electronic beats, with the heavy guitars, that it feels sort of inauthentic to me, even though I love some of these bands we're talking about. I have to say that would be, like, that sound would grate on me real quick. Like I would be, yeah. So I'm going with new metal. Also, you can't put jazz. You can't pick reggae. Like this is. All joking aside,
Dude, there's some bad reggae bands though.
There are,
but you would
some
still
bad,
get good ones.
Yeah.
Yes, there's also some bad rock band or metal bands, and so I'm gonna go with new metal, even though it is problematic because there's a few bands that I really do like in that genre.
Well, how about you, Chris? I want to know what your pick is before we dive into this deeper.
You'll get some gems on your playlist for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe worth it.
Here's where I'm at. You know, I'm no fan of hair metal.
Yeah.
But there are a few songs here and there. I can't go with that. I'm really down to between Christian rock and the pop bro country. Like,
let me get some clarification on the Christian rock real quick. Like, are you going to get the occasional Reliant K and MXPX and 5 Iron Frenzy? Or are you talking specifically like
I'm talking.
This is like the Creation Festival, like
I'm talking
the most obnoxious praise and worship level Christian rock.
The praise and worship level Christian rock. Mark, we talked about this.
So
before.
No Switchfoot.
Yeah, no, Switchfoot isn't making their way in there.
Okay.
So it's okay.
I'm talking about the stuff. We talked about this on an episode, Mark, where we were talking about that sound. What was it? Oh, it was Butterfly Kisses episode, Matt. We talked about that sound of like the worship music. Like there's just something about it, like the chord choices and the melody choices where it's
simplistic.
Like
it's intentionally simplistic all the time.
I don't think it's just that. There's something about it that just like that would be hell to me. Like that, like hearing that sound would kind of be like hell to me. But I gotta go with the pop bro country. I'll tell you why. There's a bar that opened. I live in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, and there's this bar that's like a club bar. You know, the music is like pumping, college people. Like there's a big mechanical bull, and it's so loud that you almost have to wear earplugs in this place. And it is just playing this type of music, and it is. I went to this place went with my girlfriend to we're going to go here, people watch. It's Saturday night. It was literally hell. It was so rough. Like just experiencing that music at that decibel and like what went along with it. It was, so I would have to, I'd have to agree with Matt that is the worst, the worst.
I feel like it's also like, I'm not at that bar. You know,
right.
In the same way that I have students that will rail against mumble rap, but like, how much mumble rap do I hear? I don't go on SoundCloud very often to find the latest mumble rap from 2015 or whatever, right?
Even as much as I don't like mumble rap, you still get the occasional people like Juice WRLD is included in that, and I think Juice WRLD has some good songs. So like, I can't completely disregard the whole thing.
Would Migos be considered mumble rap?
Oh, Migos is definitely mumble rap, but
I mean, Migos is pretty good, so they would.
Yeah.
I pulled up it was actually a Reddit thread of like, what's your least favorite genre? And it was just like, there was like 1,000 responses and I just marked down some stuff.
But I think the big question we need to ask ourselves is Squirrel Nut Zippers, Thunder or Blunder? And I'm going to go first because I think I'm the least shocking answer, Thunder. I have almost every album they've ever put out. They put out a great Christmas album, side note. But yeah, Squirrel Nut Zippers, Thunder, 100% of the way. Mark, you're the guest. I need to know.
Can I complicate by asking one more question of your take? Because there's one other detail I just discovered 2 days ago about this band. They have a song called La Grippe, which is about like a plague. And its thesis is we must go out tonight and dance around in this. It's like from their first album, I think.
Yeah.
And they re-released it in March of 2020, right after COVID lockdown starts. And what I'm asking is that cool or is that terribly irresponsible? I can't tell if it's early enough in COVID. My brain has wiped for the last 4 years. If that's early enough in COVID that there wasn't really the sort of like social implications of making a comment saying go out and dance around? Or was it cool, like it was so fresh? This is like March 18th or something. I looked on their YouTube video. They like put out a live performance of it. This is the modern version of the band. And I'm like, I can't tell if that's terrible or actually brilliant. I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's my complicating question.
My take on that would probably be that they were going for it in the same way that people were like posting "It's the end of the world as we know it" and "I feel fine" type situation of just like, hey, we happen to record this song that's kind of fitting. It might get us a couple plays, and like the general consensus is just like, well, fucking go down happy, I guess, if you're gonna if we're all gonna die. Like, because it's not like they're writing a song about the bubonic plague and everybody was fine and that turned out all right. I feel like they know in the lyrics that it's bad advice to like just go out and
that's
dance.
a good point. So I'm going Thunder on this band. It bums me out that what seems like a band that thrived because of collaboration dissolved into the opposite of that, maybe. But I think, you know, I love the album Hot. That's the only one that I've heard more than once. But I think their other music holds up. They have cool music videos. Maybe don't quite fit swing as a genre, but they fit something, and I don't know what it is. So yeah, Thunder for me.
Cool. And Chris?
You guys are implying that there might be, now we're not going to say there might be a little bit of a Mike Love Beach Boys thing going on here.
Yeah, like, just a tiny bit.
You know, maybe Jimbo isn't the genius here.
Yeah.
And just trying to do whatever you could do to keep it going. That we didn't look into that, so I'm not gonna make that claim.
Or maybe he is the genius, but there were multiple geniuses in the group, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like the Beatles in 2024 with just Paul McCartney or something still would be less, even though Paul McCartney is certified awesome, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Okay. This is the beauty of this podcast for me, where I didn't come in a major hater. There's been a few songs I've come in a major hater. I came in like, I really don't like this entire style of music. But watching, I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool. And just kind of hearing the two of you, your insight into this band and your, I don't know, you had a lot of good points about what is good about this band and what is cool about this band. And I don't know that I'm going to be listening to them today, but I think it would be stupid if I said they were anything other than Thunder. So I think that we got a triple certified Thunder. Jimbo, if you're out there, check your mailbox. Your certificate is coming. We just got to get it notarized.
And we're
please
also
make a copy and send it to the other people who were in your 90s version of the band.
That's right.
And also, just saying it one last time, certified Thunder also to the Nevermind the Music podcast. Go and subscribe because it's really fucking good. This has been One Hit Thunder. One Hit Thunder is hosted by Chris Fafalios of the band Punchline and produced by Matt Kelly of Geekscape.net. Underneath me, you're hearing Rewind off the Punchline Rewind EP. Visit punchlinemusic.com for any upcoming news on the band. Our podcast is on Patreon now. Find us at patreon.com/OHT podcast for early access to episodes, bonus conversations, and a chance to vote on future songs for us to cover. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to us on any podcasting app, and tune in next week for more One Hit Thunder.
All I know is I'm unknown by these things I cannot say. Rewind, 'cause passing won't cut it this time.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.
Ready for a head-bangingly good time? Dive into the world of heavy metal with the Brutally Delicious podcast. Here, we don't just talk music. We welcome you into our heavy metal family. Join us for candid chats with legends and rising stars. We go beyond the typical interviews, exploring raw emotions and the life-altering impact of heavy metal. So whether you're a diehard metalhead or just curious, join our family and let the headbanging begin with the Brutally Delicious podcast.
Decisions.
Wait a minute. Are you still looking for cars on Carvana?
Yeah,
Decisions.
When I use Carvana, I found the exact car I was looking for in minutes. Bought it on the spot.
Electric or full diesel? Decisions.
Come on, you've been at it for weeks. Just buy it already.
You're right. Crossover it is. Decisions decided.
Whether you know exactly what you want or like to take your time, buy your car the convenient way with Carvana.